All right, somebody asked me, what did my father do for a living? Uh, Before he died, he was a tool maker for a company. Uh, the thing is, you'll hear me mention some stuff. There was a period of time when me and my father did not get along, and we lived in the same house. And what happened, I didn't realize. My mother finally said to me one day, he's so jealous of you. I'm like, a father should never be jealous of a son, but that was the dynamic. So anyway, my mother, after she died from smoking, in denial at the end, I'll give you a quick brief what I went through. Um, we cleaned her stuff out. My father found all these pills, and it really upset him. So I had called the doctor up to see what my mother to make sure he did the death certificate correctly. He wrote down that her heart stopped, and I'm like, I called him back up. I said, look, dude, you know she was a heavy smoker. She died just like her father did. I want you to redo that death certificate. So he did. But I called him up one more time. We found all these pills. You never go through my mother's stuff. And we found all this medication. And then he told me, he says, your mother was bipolar. Uh, I'll just tell you that. Other stories are not worth telling because once you know what someone is bipolar, you then know why they're doing all these kooky things. So she was bipolar. And a thing that ate at her whole life is one day she got called to the principal's office in the school. And the principal says, go home, never come back. I don't know what she did. She never tell what she did, but it ate at her. Now, she must have done something really bad. But anyway, go home and don't come back. Because most schools, they send you home for like a week. So that was, my mother had that eating at her all the time. And she was always trying to present herself as sort of normal. But being bipolar, that's tough. Now, my father was very easygoing, but he would get nervous very easily, and I suffer from anxiety too, but I've learned to live with it. And I have dyslexia and I have ADD. So when I have to do something, I've already have handicaps, and I managed to do okay. And my strong suit is electronics because my brain like fires up whenever it's electronics. I think things like multiple levels deep, what it could be when it's bad. The average person always thinks it's going to be something simple, and it is sometimes. All right, but with this period of time when me and my father didn't get along was I started developing these mechanical skills, and I would watch other people and I'd ask questions, and my father would do stuff just to get it done, and sometimes he would get ridiculous, and you have to try to stop him. All right, here's one of the examples of him getting ridiculous. He would set up the metal lathe in the workshop, and it was I can't think of the name. It was sold as surplus after the war. I can almost think of a Dunlap. I got it, Dunlap lathe. It was sold after the war. My mother bought it for my father. It was sold by Sears. They were used in machine shops during the war. They would like set it up just to do one operation. So he'd set this thing up, and I look in there, and he had a washer in there, a rubber washer, and he'd work for like an hour or more setting it all up to cut a washer down to put in the faucet in the kitchen. Here's the problem: you would have an argument with him. He could make that washer exact, but he would take a washer that was all dried out, and he just like that part of it was missing. In other words, I say, Dad, the washer that was in there broke because it was dried out. Now you from the same package of miscellaneous washers, rubber washers. The next one that he was cutting down, it cut, but it was going to break, and it did. It broke the same way. So we started getting these arguments, and I would just walk up to the hardware store and show the guy a washer, and for 3 cents, I'd come home. We put it in. It would last for a year and a half or more. And then he started putting in instead of a brass um, bolt to hold the washer, he'd put a regular steel bolt in there. So at some point, the steel bolt would rust away, and now the washer's floating around there. And we take it apart, and he put the valves under the sink and backwards. When he was doing it, I said, "Look, there's arrows on them. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter." I said, "If you put it in the wrong way, the water pressure doesn't help the valve shut the water off. In other words, the water's backwards on the washer. So he does that, and of course the valves don't work. So now you got valves under the sink. Whenever you want to work on the sinks, and I should say sinks because we changed the sink 7 times because my mother was bipolar and she kept changing what kind of sink she wanted in the kitchen. So the whole all around the sink it became a nightmare. He's got the valves in backwards, so you have to shut the water off for the entire house in order to change the faucet when you're changing the sink. See, I would go around in these circles with my parents because they would make mistakes 2 and 3 levels deep, and then they would call me over to fix it. That's why when I get a radio that's bodged, it really upsets me because someone played make believe. Now I have to fix what they did wrong to the radio, and then I have to fix what's really wrong with the radio. And that was at work also. We would let other guys repair stuff, and they'd screw up real bad. The boss would make me go over there. They hated me. People hated me for that. They don't want to be showing up, and that was my job. I was a lead tech. Go over there tomorrow and straighten that guy's out. It's all the same thing with my parents. The buzzwords I always tell you about. My father used buzzwords. He would make believe he knew how to do something, and then when we start doing it, he'd be in over his head. He wouldn't ask anybody for help, and then I'd be under there with the flashlight. That was the first thing I learned how to do was hold the flashlight and aim it at his hands. Okay, I could do that. In later years, my father held the flashlight. That's how it went. And there was a period of time where he was jealous of me because I just sort of knew how to do things, but I had trouble spelling. You notice my vocabulary is there's very few words. And now at 73, I struggle to find the words because I'm going. I know I'm going. Now my father started becoming like senile at about 50, and most people didn't pick up on it. My mother would say, "You know, your father's going senile," and there were certain things. Whenever you talk about any subjects, he had eight different stories he'd pull you into, and sound smart, and then he couldn't do anything like new. And one time he went out and shot some pictures with his camera, and he forgot to rewind the film. So he opened the film, and the film came out. He wrapped it around the outside of the camera, and then he got a big fight with me. He says, I want you to take that film out and re-spool it, and I'm going to take it to be developed. And that's when I realized he was going. And I said to him, I said, that film is exposed to light. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. He'd get really mad that he messed up because there were pictures on that roll of film that he really wanted. And he went there and then he yelled at the guys over there because they didn't know what they were doing because he screwed up. He started getting angry, and I'm starting to get like that too. As you get older, you become more angry, and there's a lot involved in this. But my dad originally worked in the coal mines. His father was the head engineer in the mine, the same mine. And my father got anxious. He couldn't go down in the dark anymore. So they put him outside sorting coal. And he didn't like that. So he got a job in a small store. And every morning, the store was crappy. Every morning he had to go to a farm and get butterfat or cream. And add it to this other guy's cows because the cows are getting older and they don't have enough fat content in the milk. And that's what my father was doing. My father was involved with a guy, and I got to meet the guy. The guy was he just could only do one or two things. And my father didn't like working in the store because, you might have to stay open later. Or anyway, his friend Jim and Mertz came up to him and said, let's go to Jersey this weekend. And my father had a car, and he drove them there. And then after they got there, they said to my father, I think we're going to stay here and get a job here. And they basically kidnapped my father. So my father agreed to stay a couple days. And then they got him a job in Walter Kitty. They made fire extinguisher equipment. And my dad was like a line operator, making sure the girls had enough equipment or parts. And the girls had sticks that they'd bring up. And the safety on the machine was you have to push both hands down on the different levers. This is so you wouldn't get your hand caught in the machine. Well, the girls would place a stick across the controls and then feed the parts in by hand, and then they could turn out double rate. My father used to call them rate breakers. He used to call me a rate breaker too. But anyway, he did that, and one of the girls got hurt, and then they were yelling at him for letting them use the sticks, and So he stayed for a while, but he put in for at another company. And my dad was living at a boarding house, and Mertz and Jim had already left. Jim got a job somewhere else and moved out of the boarding house, or maybe he got married. And then Mertz went out. He became a Jehovah's Witness. He went out to the West Coast. So my father was alone, and the woman that ran the boarding house used to look after my father, and she felt sorry for him because he didn't push himself, and he introduced my father to one of my aunts, and my father didn't like her because he felt she wasn't mature enough. So he went out with my mother, and they ended up getting married, and my dad got the job at Resistaflex, and he went from being a material handler. You move the metal around to the different tool makers or machinists, and then they moved them up to a machinist where you stand there. A guy sets the machine up, and then that's all you do. The machine's set. You just put a piece of metal in the machine, and then you push a button, and the lathe goes along and cuts it. Then you do 100 of them, and then you do the next step. Then he went after the war. He came back to work at Resistaflex, and they set him up to be tool maker. Now my dad was always jealous of other tool makers. It was really bad. Oh, that guy don't know what he's doing. Well, I worked with my father on parts on the metal lathe, and then he would say to me, "How did you figure that out?" I said, "I took a bolt. This is a bolt. All I did was turn the head down in the lathe, and do this to it, and maybe a slit with a hacksaw, and he'd stand there and look at the part like, this is really good." And I'm like, yeah. I took all day to make that part, and I'm real fanatical. I tell him I used the little files on it to make it look like the part that broke. And he's holding the part that broke. He's holding the part I made out of a bolt, and I incorporated the head of the bolt into the part that broke. And it broke on somebody else's equipment because they did something stupid to it. And anyway, he taught me how to read the micrometer and the calipers and all that. He did help. But every time I'd make something, he would just stare at it. And then when I got into electronics, it was blowing his mind. One time he wanted me to explain to him how a computer works. But he really didn't want to understand about binary or anything. He just wanted some buzzwords. He had a new girlfriend. My mother had died. That's when I noticed he was a buzzword guy. And he had like 10 stories that when you talk to him, he'd pull you in one of those 10 stories. And a lot of people do that. I've started doing that now. I won't go into that, but you start realizing it's very pleasurable for you to tell a story that you really know really well versus trying to come up with the words to do something that's more complicated. And then when I talk to people about stuff, I gloss it over, and it sounds so easy. But I started not talking about radios or that because as soon as you're done, they want you to fix something for them. I had to get away from that. Now, the latest thing that happened was the guy in the neighborhood. I see him helping other people all the time, and I warned him. And then he's having trouble with money, and I went by his house, and the garbage was all on the side of the house. His garbage hauler, he didn't pay the bill. So I came home, and I put my stuff away, and I went right back. I knocked on the door. I said, "Look, I'm going to help you, only because I see you helping other people." And he's like, "Yeah." I said, and I found out he had a heart attack. He's a lot younger than me, and he's going through a really bad time. I said, "Look, I'm going to bring my garbage can over here. Get some of that garbage ready. We'll put it in my garbage can." And then we did. And we were clearing up the side of the house. And then I started telling him, I said, "Look, I don't want to give you advice, but I said, when you help other people, you got to get something in return." I said, "I've spent my whole life helping people. I got nothing to show for it. And you become very bitter." So I talked to him, and I took away the garbage. And then I said, "That other guy you've been cutting the lawn for, put some garbage in his totes." They call it a totes here. And I did that. But there's stuff going through my head. I'm at a crossroads with the radios. And I want to branch out into something else. And of course, at night I like to watch a little TV. Antenna TV just changed their schedule. I think I lost some kind of show on that channel. Yeah, there's things. I'm trying to set up a system of, part of the day I work on something for the house. Part of the day I might work on something for the radio or for the computer. And I'm changing a lot of things. And someone asked me, what did my father do? Now, my dad, I'll give him this credit. He would always try something and get in trouble. But he never failed to try. And sometimes when you open something up, you you see the part right away that's broken. But here's the thing: a lot of VCR repair guys would change the belt. Well, the belt was breaking on people, my neighbor's VCRs, because the Millennium grease. I always have trouble saying that. The grease, the part that made it wet would migrate away from the pile of grease, and the grease would get rock hard. So each time they would put the VCR in for repair, the belt was breaking sooner. Now they gave me the VCRs, and I went and cleaned the grease and reactivated it with new grease, and then it never broke a belt after that. But there's two ways to repair something: open it up, change the belt, and give it back to the person and make money, versus cleaning all the grease up and then getting it. There's two ways to repair. All right. Now my dad would fix something in order to get back to his, we used to call it his captain's chair, and he would do things half-ass, and I get into fights with him. And then 2 days later, my mother would come up, "It broke already. Can you fix it?" And then I would fix it. My father would get mad at me. This is the system that I went through with my father, and then where I worked. The guy would do something stupid at work, and they would all come back broken from out in the field. And then my boss immediately, red alert, get John over there. Now, of course, I told you about the bag of Hershey Kisses. 2-pound bag of Hershey Kisses. It would be in the drawer. And one guy didn't understand this. One time I told this story. The boss would open the drawer. I'd look in the drawer. I'd see the 2-pound bag of Hershey Kisses. He closed the drawer, and he says, "You go over there and straighten that area out over there and fix it." We had other techs over there. They can't find it. So I go over there, and within 5 minutes, I have it up and running. Guy got a wire fell off. Guy put the wire back in the wrong place. He's a technician. He went to school, but that's what he just did. And I'd go over there, and I notice, you look at something, you know that there's 2 terminals, and both wires are on the same terminal. Nobody else can see that. So I go over and I move the wire to them, and the guy that I'm helping, he's mad at me. He's cursing me up and down, and "You won't fix it." And then I fix it, and he'd be all pissed at me. And I come back, and the boss would open the drawer, and I take my 2 pounds of chocolate. This went on all the time. I told you one boss used to walk up to me, and he had a list of 30 guys. And he goes, "Can you circle like 10 of them that we don't need?" And some of these guys had made comments to me, and I knew they weren't any good. But they got their name got circled. I had no mercy that way. But my dad did get me into a lot of stuff, and he did show me, how to use a micrometer. And when you use a micrometer, if anybody ever taught you, it almost sounds like double speak, because the way it goes around, was it a 6,000ths instead of 5? Oh, anyway, it's not very intuitive. Now, the way to hold it, that my father taught me that, and I taught someone else that. I said he had to go take a test, and I said one of the things when they're looking at you to see if you can use the micrometer is it's your union job. And I said not only do they want the correct reading, they want to see how you hold it. And there's a certain way to hold a micrometer. And I taught the guy that. He went flying colors. He's working in a company now. I knew all that. You got to be professional. That's what they're looking for. And when the union job opens up in a company, it's open for a while because they really don't have anybody in the building that can do that job. And then after a while, it gets open it gets in the newspaper, and someone comes and gets the job. But I get involved with a lot of different things with people. But what I changed now is I don't help people that I know never helped anybody else. I told you a quick story. The girl died, and I was giving her movies. And she goes, "Oh, yeah, I could use it." She's a hoarder. She didn't even have a player. And I told her, "Take this movie, watch it, and then pass it on to someone." They're all still in the house. And someone that's cleaning the house out says, "Do you want them back?" I said, "That wasn't the point. The whole point was they were the good movies. They were like, was it Maroon? No, it wasn't Maroon. Tom Hanks, where he's on that island. Is it Survive? No. Well, anyway, all the top movies I would find at the dollar store or at the Goodwill or at the yard sales. And I'd see it, and this is a top movie, like When Harry Met Sally. That's a movie you can watch more than once. So I would go over to this girl, and I'd give it to her, and then finally one day she told me she needed an HDMI cable. And then she broke it to me. I didn't give her any more movies. Oh, and her boyfriend I was giving him all kinds of stuff. He was a hoarder too, and they never used it. I didn't get to it. I didn't get to it. Yeah, it was. I should have thrown the thing out. It would have been used more, being thrown in the landfill than the hoarder. But yeah, my dad was he didn't like coal mining, and he wanted something more. And I don't know how well he did in school. A lot of times when I asked him how to spell a word, he'd say sound it out. I don't think he could spell. I think he had some of the disabilities I have. And then my mom, I told her she was bipolar, and I didn't understand that growing up. One minute she'd be absolutely normal, the next minute she'd be paranoid. I won't go into that. When you're around someone growing up, you don't realize things until uh, other people point them out to you. But I called the doctor up and I said, "What's all this medication?" Oh, she should have told him. She didn't tell my father. And my dad, he just, he was an enabler. He just accepted her for the way she was. And then he was so nervous when we found he's going through her stuff, and you never went in my mother's drawers. You just didn't. And we found all the nail files. My mother would accuse us of stealing her nail file. It's sort of this stuff is sort of funny. And after she died, she had them hidden all in the drawers. Like in a Bible, there was like three filing nail files in the sides of the drawers. There was like she had them all hidden because she swore we were taking her nail files, and she had a paranoia going there. I won't go into it real deep. Now that I understood she was bipolar, I understand now. I have other people that I know are bipolar, and I have to deal with them. And but they're on some medication. My mother would get the medication from the doctor, and he'd give her instructions, and she'd come home and never take the medication. I won't go into it. There's so much when someone's not right, and I'm not right. I admit it, man. I know I have these quirks, and I have to deal with these quirks. And I'm going to tell you one of the quirks I have is I get up in the morning the same time. I can't sleep in even 5 minutes. All right? If I get out of bed thinking I have overslept a little bit, no. It's still my time. And I really get annoyed from that. And once I get out of bed, if I eat something, I can go back and lay in bed. But when I'm in bed, it's like I have to get up and go to that job because people are counting on me. Anal retentive, that's what it actually is. I know what I am. I know my limitations. I know when I have to go look something up and reread it. And other people don't, man. They think that their shit don't stink and they know everything, and they shoot from the hip and miss. And and a lot of people out there now, like what you could do Trump. A lot of people think he's intelligent. They think he's really smart, and there's no fixing that. You can't fix stupid. And that guy that said that holds the drink and the cigarette or the cigar, he didn't come up with that phrase. He got that from somebody else. I went looking. I said, "That's a really good one. You can't fix stupid." And then what is his name? Now I'm going to forget his name. I think it was Tom Hanks. Was it Tom Hanks in there? Stupid is as stupid does. Forrest Gump. Yeah, I've learned a lot in the last 10 years living here, having two sets of neighbors to compare to. And I had neighbors in New Jersey that had four sons. And the guy would go out on his front lawn and stare at my house. And I knew he needed help. And I come over there, and he goes, and he wanted it done like right away. One of his four children, one of them that I grew up with, would come right over eventually. The other three, no. They didn't want to go near their parents. See, a couple of kids told me how bad their parents were, and I had to deal with them just before I left. And yes, I saw their mean side. And I told you, when I left New Jersey, only one neighbor talked to me and helped me. The rest, he's leaving. We can't use him anymore. So when I moved here, I started making sure I didn't get stuck helping people that weren't going to help me in return. It's a horrible way to be. But, I finally, it's rule number one, take care of yourself. Rule number two, obey rule number one. I never learned those. I was always like, I'll help the other guy. Raised Episcopal, you help the other person first. That's how they raised me. You're supposed to help the other person first. Once he's okay, then you're okay. But the other people, they'll go buy you something you don't need, or they give you something, they're regifting. I have people that regift here. I help them out, and they regift me something else. I won't go into it in deep, but yeah. There are sort of people like this one guy I helped with the garbage. I gave him sticks for his fence posts for his garden. They're fence posts, but they're a lightweight fence post. And he uses the garden. And I forget some of the things. Oh, I loan him tools and stuff like that. And at Christmas, they show up at my door every year with cookies. And I forget that I do help them during the year. But and then recently I said, look, I'm going to help you if I can because I see you helping other people. I have a certain creed that I go by, help other people. But I've changed it because it didn't work out for me. And I'm telling this guy, I said, and he's telling me he's helping like 8 different people. He's mowing their lawns. But he's only getting these shitty little favors back. And I said, mowing the lawn is like $30 a cut. And he's not getting $30 back. And he's not getting any of it back. I won't go into, I was doing that here, helping people. And, when they get the lawnmower, it's better than the one I got. And it's amazing stuff. It's just, people will use you. And, all this rant here started when somebody asked me what my dad did. But like I said, he treated me really bad for about 6 years. Oh, and his hearing was bad. So he'd be arguing with me, and he'd be on the same side of the argument with me. And he just wasn't hearing. And he never he got his ears cleaned out, but he never got a hearing aid. So that's the stuff. Oh, and how my mother died, heavy smoker, and in the hospital, in denial. Same with her daughter died the same way. And then my sister. And then my father, before he died, he had me sitting up late at night to be there when he came home from his dates. See, it totally switched to where I became the adult and he became the child. And he said to me, and then he'd come home from the date. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. And he'd want to sit with me and tell me about his date. And then I have to go to work the next day. I said, I have to go to work tomorrow. I said, you're retired. And he didn't understand that. There were certain things he just didn't grasp. And I told you, there's a lot of people out there, you teach them something, and 6 months later, they've totally forgot. And my father was like that. He'd stand there holding the 2 pieces. And he's like, he knew how to do something with those 2 parts. And I would tell him, oh, okay. Okay. Then it would come back to him. Now, my neighbor next door, when he went senile from strokes, he had an electrical cord out there and a hose. And he's trying to put them together. And he goes, why won't these go together? And I started explaining to him. And he got mad at me. I walked away. And then later on, he come over and rang the doorbell. Can you come over and help me? So I helped him after that. After that, he would let me finish hooking the thing. He had a swimming pool. He had to maintain the swimming pool. And one time, they had a bunch of chairs in front of the house, really expensive chairs, and they disappeared. And what happened was he couldn't remember how to open the back gate to put the chairs away. He put them on the other side of the house. The wife had the police come down and do a report about the chairs being stolen. And then at some point, somebody walked to the other side of the house and they saw the chairs. And I was trying to help him. While I was trying to sell my house, he would get out of the house and go for a walk. He didn't know where he was going. And I'd bring him back, and the person looking at my house goes, what's going on? I said, oh, he's got Alzheimer's. And they get in. They didn't want to see the house. They get in the car and drive off on me. And my realtor was like, I said, well, after that, I said, you show the house. I said, I might have to be corralling the neighbors back. And I had 2 other neighbors go after I left, and then a couple of years after that, 2 more neighbors. Everybody in my neighborhood, not every man, except for one, got like some type of cognitive problem and then Alzheimer's. That's why I dread, when I can't find a word. And sometimes when I can't find it, you'll hear me laughing. Like what's it? Not automatic radio. That stupid thing. I cannot figure the name of that stupid company. Oh man, yeah, I have the radio, and sometimes I can remember the name of the radio. Channel Master. See, it does come to me, but there's certain names and words, places, and it's hilarious stuff. And then I'm always testing myself. Let's see if I can do it. Larry David helped Seinfeld do Seinfeld. Now there's Larry Gilbert. If you watch MASH, he directed and did stuff on MASH. So last night I'm like Larry Gilbert and Larry David in my head. I was having trouble. I'm going. I'm 73, and it's a progressive thing when you get older, and not everybody. Some people stay sharp until the day they die. But I just want to sort of answer the guy's question about what did my father do. Give you an idea of what I'm like. My mother, go home from here. Don't ever come back. And man, that really ate at her. And my mother wanted to go to night school over in Kearney. And she's saying to me, she says, I can't get in there because I don't have a high school diploma. I said, did they ask to see the diploma? And she says, no. I said, where's the thing you fill out? It asked, what school did you graduate from? They're not going to check it. She was going to learn some sewing. She bought a sewing machine. And she went to night school. My dad used to drive her. And then she died. And then my dad decided to go to night school. And can you drive me? The neighborhood's not that safe. So there I was being the helicopter parent with my dad. And that's what happens. If your parents live long enough, you become their caretaker. And my parents both died early. My dad died from heart disease. And my mother died from smoking. And my dad, he didn't exercise. He would just, it was the minimum. Because he had a job where he had to stand all day as a tool maker. And when he come home, he was shot. And my mother, as soon as he come in the door, he would kiss my mother and then go take a shit. He would hold it in all day. He wouldn't shit. He wouldn't shit in the bathrooms at work. It's so funny when you really understand people. And I said to my father, why don't you shit at work on their time? And he couldn't answer me on that. See, they used to call me fish sometimes because the food I used to eat, or I still sort of eat, I pooped a lot during the day. And my one friend when I would come out of the bathroom, he'd go to me, you're like fish. I guess on Barney Miller, the guy was always in the bathroom. But I pooped and peed and shit on company time. I didn't hold it in. I might have mentioned one time too is I was such a valuable worker. The boss says to me, look, we can't have you take off to go to the dentist. I went to the dentist on company time. I'd go out for lunch. I'd go out for lunch and then go over to the dentist and then or go to the dentist, then eat lunch, then come back. And the boss says, I just need you here till 4 o'clock, and I was only allowed, I told you, I only allowed to take off Tuesdays. And because we had 4:40, some people work from Monday to Thursday. Some people work from Tuesday to Friday. And I wasn't allowed to take off. How did it work? I wasn't allowed to take off Monday or Friday. I can only take off Tuesday. And I had a senile old lady next door to me. And she called me up every time I was off on Tuesday. How come you're always off on Tuesday? And like a fool, I would tell her the whole story each time instead of, look at you, fat lesbo bitch. Stop calling me up. No, that's not what I would do. Oh, remember I told you that we had 4:40 at work, and there has to be a guy there on Mondays and Fridays, so they only let me take off Tuesday. I could take off Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday, but I couldn't have Monday or Friday off. I should reiterate that. But Tuesday's a really good day if you got to do any kind of shopping. The stores are fairly stocked. There's very few customers in the store. So Tuesday was my go-to day to take off. And there were times where they would call me up and make sure I was coming in the next day because something had gone wrong. And they had a lot of technicians in that place. But they would run away from, I told you I worked on Olivetti, and Olivetti stuff was all in Italian. And it scared a lot of techs. The schematic is almost identical to an American schematic. The transformers, when they draw the windings, they're squared. There's a couple things that look a little different, and but I've gone through a lot to get to here. And what I want to do is I'm trying to come up with a new hobby, something I'm interested in. There's so many hobbies, but I don't have any interest in them. And I did the computer stuff and the Arduino. Somebody on the group explained to me how to say Arduino correctly. And then I never bought a Raspberry Pi. When I did stuff, I used my laptop as a computer and send the signals in and out of the laptop. So that's what one of the persons says. Instead of buying an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi, get yourself a used laptop. And you got the power supply. Everything's already wired. You go right into doing your software. And I can do software patches and changes, but I can't. I tried writing from scratch. I can do basic with numbered lines, but the regular stuff, I couldn't catch it. I just couldn't get it. So, but there's a lot, and I know some people watch my videos and say, "Boy, this guy's really smart." I'm smart in one area, and I stay with it. You saw that SX40, the Helicrafters, where I went and splinted that gear, and it bailed me. And the guy wanted $100 for the assembly just to get a gear that might be broken. And once I got that one done, I felt good because I was making the gear from scratch. And I used to do that. I used to be able to do that. I used to fix clocks and watches. But when you get older, you lose that hand coordination and you lose patience. The most important part of any repair is patience. And when you get older, you start to lose patience because what you're working on really doesn't need to be fixed. I'm going to tell you that the elephant in the room, you might like old radios for the emotional anchor. And what's actually happening is you're nostalgic. You want the past. When you're holding on to an old radio and you're working on it, you're back there. You're back in the old days when you wanted that radio and you couldn't afford it. And that's what's happening with me. I told you my father was a woman that works. Husband died. He was a ham operator. She says, come over to my house and pick out a nice radio for your son. And my father didn't take me. He went with another guy. And I'm waiting all day. I'm finally going to get a radio that's decent. My father walks in without a radio. And my mother took it up. She went on him. She says, that woman told you to come over and pick a radio out for your son. What part of that? And this was at the part where he was still like jealous of my skills. So I think there was a little bit of I'm going to go there and then I'm going to come home with nothing for him. And that's what he did to me. But that made the wanting stuff a little bit more. Now, we did put a radio together right after that at Christmas time. I told you it was the KT-135 Lafayette regenerative radio. I told you, I think, on the last video. And we did that. And that caused the emotional anchoring. And everybody's got that. Some people got a car. It's with a car. The first car, the car they always wanted. Someone else has the car. They never got to work on it. And that's what my friends were getting. They were getting cars, radios. They were getting cars that the other person never would talk about. I'm going to restore that. Never happens. And I had friends that would then bring that car home, and they'd have 3 cars in the backyard. And the problem with that is the mice get in the car or whatever, and it's rusting outside, and they don't have the money to work on it. They don't have the time to work on it. They end up paying someone to drag it away. I know a guy. I went by his house a couple times, and he kept having more and more boats in the backyard. And each boat was a project boat of somebody else. And he had his project boat. And it ended up that he paid a guy to come with a Sawzall and cut them up and take them away. It was like $3,000 to get it removed, the 3 big boats. And there was another guy that did the same thing. He just happened to do cable television at a boatyard, and they gave him some boats. And he left it uncovered, the boat outside, and it rained and it filled the boat up. And then he went on the bottom of the boat and drilled holes to drain the water out. Yeah, I got rid of him as a friend because he was freaking stupid. All right, great posh personality. People used to give him really good stuff all the time, and he'd break it or sell it. I got rid of him. All right, unbelievable. I bought the guy a double-sided hedge clippers, and back in the old days they were only single-sided. I bought him better hedge clippers than I have. And I come over to his house, and they're in the rain. They're outside in the rain, and they were like $75. And after that, I was like, I also loaned him money to buy a house. He gave me the money back without the interest. There's shit that I went through with people, and they look at you, and if you call them on any of this, they're going to dump you as a friend. Well, do that. Dump them as a friend because they're not really a friend. I think that's it. All right. I hope you got some insight.